Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen wassalatu wassalamu ala ashrafil anbiya'i wal mursaleen nabiyyina ali wa sahbihi ajma'in amma ba'd. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Let me see if this so let's rotate this. Apologies for the close-ups. I've been informed by my colleague that I shouldn't worry about it, that it's actually getting picked up and there should be no problems, inshallah. So I think what I've been told is if you rotate, sorry, not rotate rather, but if you go on full screen, I shouldn't be sat on my side. I should actually be sat properly. I'm in a few teething problems, my apologies. I hope it's working now. We're going at side angle. Goodness me. Normally I have problems like this. Okay, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wassalatu wassalamu ala ashrafil anbiya'i wal mursaleen nabiyyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Amma ba'd. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I'm just give me a couple of seconds so that I can take the link from our video, the live stream, and place it on our Telegram channel so that people have got access to it. So here we go. Copy link channel so that people, and now I post on here. For those of you who aren't on our Telegram channel is https://t.me/The Olive Foundation. So that's where you need to be. Let me just post that on here. And send a little brief a lot of admin work here. Now live. Let's bold something. I'm not sure why that link isn't working. Should be working. Let me see if I can do it another way. Oh, ho, ho, ho. If I can do it another way. Edit. Right, that should work. Okay, mashallah. Apologies for this. Let's forward that to the. We then also have a Fatawa group, both for sisters and brothers. And what I'm doing now is I'm forwarding it to them. And questions on this topic may be posted. And that. Copy. Okay, that's the administrative work done. Last thing, sorry. Nearly the administrative work done. Just need to post one more. And Let's post it on here now, live. Well, at least whilst doing this, it gives opportunity for others to join the viewing. Oh, that's my excuse. So now we've got it. We've got it on our Twitter as well, on my Twitter there, and I'll make sure that it's sent around. There we have it. Done. Now, pardon the phone pinging every now and then, and also because my phone's still switched on, so some questions will be coming through both via the Telegram Fatwa groups that I informed you about, and also through my phone, obviously directly, and through our Twitter basis as well. Now, I used an interesting title. The title was, "How do you prefer your frog, soft or hard?" And then I have a subtext or a subtitle which was Peeling the Muslim. Sounds like a culinary cooking session, but it's not. It's actually very serious, but I've used a title. It's drawing to this sort of or what's deemed as an understanding that we have, that if you were to place a frog inside a pan with water in it, and if you started to heat the water, then what you would find is that the frog would stay in the water, and as it was being heated, eventually it would be killed, as it wouldn't leave. Whereas if you were to place a frog in a hot water vessel, then it would leave immediately as soon as it made contact with the water. And the argument is that if you make changes slowly, then the impact it can have on the individual is not measured. And it's only when things get really bad and at that time there's no reaction, if we look at the frog situation, and as a result you bring an end to the frog. However, this is proven to be scientifically invalid. Dr. Hutchinson, a professor at the University of Oklahoma, who specializes in the thermal relations of amphibians, said that this is not a scientific phenomenon. It does not exist. But that said, the phenomenon is real. The phenomenon is real. We've seen, and over time, how Islam across the world, particularly in the West, and when I mean Islam, I'm specifically speaking about normative Islam, how it's becoming, when we say normative Islam, we're talking about Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah, yani the Islam that you and I recognize, the Islam which was, as we now have to put a title in front of it, like normative, or a descriptor, like normative or traditional or things of that nature. Before there was only Islam, and that was it. I appreciate there was different interpretations by small groups that existed, but the general definition of Islam was such that it did keep out certain things which were not termed as Islamic. However, with time we've seen, especially over the last decade or two, that one thing after another has led where Islam is being sort of remodified, and as a result, even I am now having to use adjectives like normative Islam or traditional Islam. Now, this was prophesied by the Prophet ﷺ when he said that ya'ati ala nas zamanun, that time will come upon people, zamanun, in which asabiru fihim, the one who stays sabir, and he stays patient, and this is the narration of Anas ibn Malik, there's another narration of Sayyidina Abu Hurairah, in which he says al-qabid rather than as-sabir. As-sabiru fihim ala dinihi kal-qabid al-jama, that the one who holds onto his deen is like the one who's holding onto an ember. So when we mean by an ember, the first thing is one wouldn't touch an ember. Never mind hold on to it, because they can see it's hot, it looks dangerous, it's going to cause pain. So when a person holds it, then as they are holding on to it, the pain and the hurt and the burning is going through into their hand. But they're holding on to their deen, because this is how difficult holding on to deen will be. So what are we talking about here? We're talking here obviously about the identity of the Muslim, in the sense that him, as he's trying to define himself, as he continues to be, or how he sees himself as a Muslim, and how he has to stay true to his deen, to ensure that his identity, as he portrays it, is as the traditional texts describe it. Now, how does one bring about this identities I mentioned to you? We have a statement of Imam Malik ibn Anas radiallahu, in which he says, "As-sunnatu mithlu safinati Nuh man rakibaha naja wa man takhallafa anha halaka." That the sunnah is like the ship, the ark of Nuh alayhi salatu wasalam. Whomsoever rides it, then he's safe, and whosoever stays back from it, who doesn't actually go to ride upon it, then he is destroyed. So it's an interesting way in which the identity of a believer or the definition of a believer is associated with the sunnah. And that's been defined by saying that the sunnah is like the ship of Nuh alayhi salatu wasalam. That it's not anything else. It's this is a metaphor that's used. We don't. If we look in Surah Hud in the Quran, ayat number 42 and 43, what we can find is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions this story of Nuh alayhi salatu wasalam when he built the ark. And we pick up the story when the floods have come and the ship is afloat. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, "Ba'da a'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim, bismillahir rahmanir rahim, wa hiya tajri bihim fi mawjin kal jibal." And it flows with them, or it's flowing with them, yani inside the ark, on waves like mountains. So meaning here that the waves are so large, they're being described as mountains. Wanada Nuh, and Nuh alayhi salatu wasalam called ibnahu, his son. Wakana fi ma'zilin, and he was away from them. So whilst Nuh alayhi salatu wasalam was on the ship, also his close family members who had accepted Islam were on the ship. His son, who should have been on the ship, wasn't there. So he said, "Ya bunayya, oh my son, irkab ma'ana, ride with us. Wala takun ma'al kafirin, and don't be with those who've denied Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Don't be with those that have turned away from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and rejected him and denied his existence." So how does Nuh alayhi salatu wasalam's son respond? He says, "Qala sa'awi ila jabalin, I will find refuge, I will swim away, and I'll find a tall mountain, and if I find a tall mountain, then the peak of the mountain I'll be able to get to. Ila jabali ya'simuni, and that will save me min al-ma, from the floods. It will save me from there." So he's looking at finding a rational, physical way of saving himself. Qala, Nuh alayhi salatu wasalam responds back to him. He says, "La asim al-yawm, there will be no safety, there will be no savior today, min amrillah, from the order of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, illa man rahim, except whom Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has mercy upon. Wa hala baynahum al-mawj, and then between them a huge wave came, fakana min al-mughraqin, and he was from those who were drowned." So the only reason I'm recollecting and narrating to you the story of Nuh alayhi salatu wasalam is because that is what Imam Malik radiallahu anhu described as the sunnah. He described it or assimilated it to mean the ship of Nuh alayhi salatu wasalam. So where do we find our ships? Where do we find our arks, so that we may also take refuge from the changes that we're seeing, which is leading to people, or very few people, holding onto their iman to such an extent where it's just about held inside the hand? Well, we have to look at the institutes and the ulama. It's the institutes and the ulama is where we're going to find that refuge. So what are we talking about institutes? Well, we're speaking about, when we speak about institutes, we're speaking about madaris, madrasas, Islamic schools, or anything which is sort of has a statutory education, those which don't have a statutory education, which are carried out in the evening, the masajids, these sorts of environments. And what we find at the moment is there's quite an onslaught on Islamic schools themselves, in which there's a great pressure, in which Muslims are looked at for, or assumptions are made that an Islamic school will have none of this in it, or Islamic schools will have this in it. So there's already preconceived ideas of inspectors or anybody else coming into these institutes in which they're then looking for those particular things. They're searching for those particular things. Whereas when they may be coming into a state maintained school, that's not necessarily what they're looking for. They will come with an open mind, and they will let their observations dictate the direction in which the inspection will be carried out. But also, in terms of if a Muslim is looking for identity, then it's the Islamic schools themselves that part that identity. And it's also important then, whilst we have these Islamic schools and these Islamic institutes, that the community supports them. It is a responsibility, a fard kifaya upon the local community to support these institutes. And the way they support those institutes is obviously sending their children to those institutes, and also ensuring that whatever skills that they have, they share those skills with those institutes. It's a very important thing to bear in mind as to how, because if we look at this Nuh alayhi salam's ship, the Safina to Nuh, what is it? These are going to be in these Islamic institutes. The formative years of our children are within those years of secondary school and maybe some in primary school. That's absolutely essential that we still have some education systems, or we have some education establishments that can provide that education. So really important, I want to stress that point, the support that should be given to Islamic schools, the working with Islamic schools, and ensuring, because what the Islamic schools are doing is they continue to preserve that identity. They don't, they're not sort of, anti-British society or go against. In fact, you will find that those schools are even more so, treat this area as more important than any others, because they know that the pressure is going to be on them more than anybody else. So they ensure that they're putting things into place in order to integrate the society, but not to an extent where it's assimilating the society. So those are the institutions that I speak of. The other area is where we need to develop more on, is particularly the ulama reclaiming the mimbar, as I refer to it. Because at the moment, ulama are sort of separating themselves from the mimbar. They're not associating themselves with the mimbar. And as they're not, what we're getting is a vacuum. And as we're getting a vacuum, I'm just looking at the questions, but we're not getting any questions, mashallah. As we're in a vacuum, or we're leaving a vacuum, we're finding then that others are filling that vacuum up. So this can be charlatans, individuals with some historic Islamic tradition, but they've now abandoned that tradition. Sometimes what we have is individuals will say, well, okay, he's studied at a traditional seminary, he's studied there, therefore his view should be acceptable. No. If an individual goes against what traditional seminaries stand for, if his opinions are going against that, just because he studied at that particular or a particular institute does not necessarily guarantee him now this capacity to be able to issue whatever he chooses. As long as he's giving fatwa, as long as he's giving opinions which are within the tradition and supported by the ulama, the contemporary ulama, those obviously who are his seniors or his contemporaries, then he's not doing anything wrong, and he should be supported. It's those individuals who pick out sort of outliers, information which is completely sort of taken out of context and applied in a context which is not relevant. So what we have is we have this scenario in which is described in the hadith, فَسُئِلُوا فَأَفْتَوْا بِغَيْرِ عِلْمٍ فَضَلُّوا وَأَضَلُّوا. So they asked questions because, as I mentioned, this ulama leaving this vacuum, they need to reclaim the mimbar, and when they leave this vacuum, then others come to fill that vacuum in, and as others come to fill that vacuum in, they give fatwa without any knowledge, and when we mean by knowledge, traditional knowledge, so they deviate themselves and they deviate others. So that's an area that we need to make sure. We are noticing as well that there is some work in place to look at a green paper that was put together recently, which was to look at certain areas, or look at generally integration, particularly, even though it seems to be addressed to all communities, there seems to be quite clearly within the text the sort of concentration really on Muslim minorities, and the view that certain minorities aren't integrating properly. And what they're doing is there's some work that's going to be carried out looking at 5 areas in particular, Bradford, Blackburn, Waltham Forest, Peterborough and Walsall, in which some effort is going to be made to try to get these areas or try out certain practices in these areas to see how that plays out before it's rolled out across the country. Now we need to try to get to the bottom of this to understand what is it that's going on. What is this definition of integration? Because one man's integration could be another person's assimilation. So we need to be absolutely sure that we're talking about the same thing. And I've written in detail about this particular topic for those of you who aren't aware. So to summarize, as I know we're sort of coming to 25 minutes, to summarize, what I wanted to really touch upon today was that let's not be in this frog system in which change is taking place slowly until we reach a point where we're no longer identified as Muslims, where we don't even know what a Muslim is or a Muslim isn't, because we're so confused by all these various views coming from either charlatan or people posing as ulama, even though they may have gone through a particular traditional form of study, and then they're trying to justify that their opinion is as valid as anybody else's. Cannot be, because one opinion is from a tradition, another opinion is from outside the tradition. What I mean by outside the tradition which is acceptable. So we have this frog syndrome that we have to be careful about. With respect to the where would we find our identity preserved, we need to look at Islamic schools, institutes, madaris, darlooms. We need to be associated with them, not for their sake, but for our own sake, so that our identity as Muslims is understood. Because as the hadith describes, we're in a situation where now literally it's like holding on to a hot ember, which is obviously going to cause pain, and the Muslim community is feeling pain, as we would expect from a hot ember. So that's that area. One area is our identity, how it's slowly being removed, and where are we going to find that safety? Where are we going to find our Noah's Arks? Where are we going to find them? And I've described them to you. As a result, not only is there a view within the sort of authorities or within the government, there's also a view outside of the government within our own Muslims, those individuals who, because of our ulama stepping back from the minbar and various other not talking about these particular topics, we're finding other individuals stepping in and trying to guide the Muslim community. Well, what they're really doing is, as the hadith mentioned, فَأَفْتَوْا بِغَيْرِ عِلْمٍ. So what they're doing is فَضَلُّوا وَأَضَلُّوا. Not only are they themselves deviant, they're sending others astray. And finally, we need to be extra cautious as we move forward to see what is this definition that we find of integration and how that will play out in those 5 particular cities. I've been having conversations with people in all of those cities, so we're trying to sort of have a concerted effort depending on what pans out and see how we can move forward, inshallah. Wa akhiru da'wana and alhamdulillah rabbil alameen. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.